Like, if I was from another planet or if I was some interdimensional being, I would probably look at this infantile race, this species, this bizarre territorial apes with thermonuclear weapons, this very weird species. I'd probably look at them as very chaotic. And I wouldn't really have much concern for who's running it.
Well, it depends. Like that. Okay, so the template that you're using to understand this is like science fiction, right? And that's the world that we have grown up in, but that's an anomaly. Like no one else has ever thought that. Every other society has assumed we're being acted on by spiritual forces at all times. Once you discard your very, very recent assumptions, relatively speaking, about how the world works, you're like, well, that kind of seems like the obvious explanation, right?
Joe Rogan recently had Tucker Carlson on, and when the conversation shifted to UFOs, Tucker argued that they're demons and maybe that the U.S. government has been working with them knowingly. At least that's what I understood him to say. Let's watch the full clip now.
If they're spiritual beings, which I believe they are, like it's a binary. They're either, you're on team good or team bad. You can assign any name to it you want, but like, what are these things? Are they good or bad? And I think some of them are bad.
Well, when you say spiritual, like what makes you draw that conclusion that they're spiritual?
What's the obvious? I mean, spiritual may be the wrong word. Supernatural. They're beyond nature as we understand it. I mean, obviously they are. I mean, just chart their physical behavior. It doesn't, it goes outside of what we understand about physics. No visible means of propulsion, coming at indescribable speed, hitting the ocean, continuing at speeds that are impossible undersea. I mean, in other words, if I take a 9mm round or 7.62 by 39 and shoot you at 50 yards underwater in a swimming pool, and it's even more intense in salt water because it's denser, you could catch the bullet if it even makes it to you, right? So if you have a craft, any object underwater that's traveling at 500 knots as measured by sonar, right there you're challenging our understanding of physics. Like, what is that? How can that be? So yeah,
they've tracked that. They've tracked things going 500 knots under the sea.
Yeah, really. Yeah, much faster than any object can actually go undersea. Yo, for sure. Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on underwater, and a lot. And there's video of these things coming out of the sky into the water and also emerging from the water.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, believe it or not, there's actually some scientific voices that can weigh in on this. Hugh Ross, who is a Christian but is also an astrophysicist, had this to say about the same point.
Millions of people claim to have had encounters with UFOs. And the vast majority you can explain as simply natural phenomena or human activity or a hoax. But there's a 1% residual that you can show is real but not physical. As a Christian, I realized God created two different species of intelligent beings. Humans that are physical and real, and angels that are real but not physical. There are literally hundreds of places where UFOs have crashed into the ground. The ground is depressed, vegetation is damaged, snow is melted. Obviously something real happened there, but there's no debris, there's no artifacts. And when the UFO is observed coming through the atmosphere, let's say 18 to 25,000 miles per hour, no sonic boom, no heat friction. So we're dealing with something that obviously is real, but it's not physical. I know of a half dozen other physicists and astronomers who are not believers who draw the same conclusion that I do.
So
it's all so blurry, though.
Yeah, I don't think some of it's that blurry. I think some of it's crystal clear.
We just don't have access to it? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Just we haven't seen it?
Correct.
So they have some stuff.
For sure. So, but there's just a lot going on underwater, and it's measured. And so, whatever. I mean, these are all, again, this is like the most obvious observable level of it, but then you just ask yourself, like, what is this actually? And, if there's been extensive knowledge of this for decades, like maybe 80 years at least, if not going back to the 30s, 90 years, to what end? So there are two possible explanations, obvious explanations. The first is the one you often hear, which is this is so heavy that if the public were to know about it, it would be just disruptive. It would be too scary. Like, you don't want to scare people for no good reason. There's nothing we can do about it. And you also don't want to suggest that, the U.S. military isn't capable of protecting the country, the homeland. And it does suggest that. If you can't control these objects in your airspace, and that's known, if they can't, that's known, okay? Then that suggests a limit to the power of the U.S. military, and you don't want to tell people that because then they like won't believe that they're safe. I get it. But then there's a deeper level, which is like, okay, what's your relationship with these things? What is the U.S. government's relationship with these things? And there's evidence that there is a relationship and that it's a longstanding. And that raises like a lot of questions about intent.
So I want to see if I've got this right. Tucker, putting the pieces together, landed on that there are actually demons that the U.S. government is knowingly working with, or at least in some sort of communication with, something like that. I imagine that there's like this guy named Bob, who's one of the demons working with high security intel and stuff. And he's communicating with Bill, who's the human counterpart to his job. And they're discussing, Taylor Swift as they play Words with Friends and talk about high security stuff or something. Or maybe it's not quite as cartoonish as that. If there are angels and demons, and if the Christian worldview is basically correct, would we not expect the national leaders and the people with the most power would have a lot of spiritual warfare around them? If you're a Christian, what do you make out of that suggestion?
And people have been hurt by these things. That's a fact. That's a fact. It's a knowable fact. It's a provable fact. And killed. And I'm not saying millions of people have been killed by whatever these things are, but people have been killed, and it's known because it's working its way through the courts out of the VA. So, I don't know, an object that is by definition supernatural, it's above the laws of nature as we understand them, and that has resulted in the deaths of people. But we don't spend enough time thinking about like what that adds up to. Like, not good, actually, not good. American citizens have died, and you're hiding it. Why are you hiding that? Why would you hide that?
Perhaps because they don't have any explanations. Because it's so beyond our comprehension that they're still trying to piece it together. Like, I would wonder how much interaction they really do have with these things. Like, if I was from another planet or if I was some interdimensional being, I don't know how much I'd give a about the president. I don't know how much I'd give a about the government.
See, he's going back to
Probably
aliens.
look at this
He's thinking about
infantile
aliens.
Race, this species, this bizarre territorial apes with thermonuclear weapons, this very weird species. I'd probably look at them as very chaotic, and I wouldn't really have much concern for who's running it, especially if they have the ability to travel at insane speeds and go undetected. And
well, it depends. Like that. Okay, so the template that you're using to understand this is like science fiction, right? These are an advanced race of beings from somewhere else. But the template that every other society before us has used is a spiritual one. Mm-hmm. There is a whole world that we can't see that acts on people, a supernatural world that's acting on us all the time for good and bad. Every society has thought this before ours. In fact, every society in all recorded history has thought that until, I'll be specific, August 1945, when we dropped the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And all of a sudden, the West is just officially secular. We're God. There is no God but us. And that's the world that we have grown up in. But that's an anomaly. Like, no one else has ever thought that. There's never been a society that thought that. Every other society has assumed, and they've had all kinds of different explanations, and the details differ. But the core idea does not differ, never has differed from caves until now, that we're being acted on by spiritual forces at all times. And so to someone born before or living before 1945, I think it would have been much more obvious that this is the thing that every society has written about.
Obvious, you said.
And in fact, that battle, that unseen battle around us, that spiritual battle, has like been the basis of every society, of every religion, not just Christianity. So like it just, once you discard your very, very recent assumptions, relatively speaking, about how the world works.
Does it become obvious?
Kind of seems like the obvious explanation, right?
Yeah, we live in a day in the West in which the major institutions are pushing the culture to this notion that there's no supernatural, no miracles, no angels and demons, no spirits, nothing like that. And of course, that has had some impact. It's resulted in a Western secular mindset such that even many Christians find themselves cringing at the notion of talking about demon possession or angels or something like that. And so people have been conditioned to think that this is the intellectually fulfilled and reasonable position to take. And if that sort of naturalism is your take, then then these are the options that are available to you. This is some sort of advanced technology that's alien, or you could say that it's advanced technology that we have developed, or that some foreign enemy of the United States has developed, or you could say that there are interdimensional travelers here, as has been suggested. But you have to stick to somewhat naturalistic explanations if you don't want to be shamed and embarrassed by the culture. If you were raised, on the other hand, in a society, in a time and place where it is acceptable culturally to believe that the supernatural is real, to believe what everyone believed until 10 minutes ago, and you'd still be considered an intellectually fulfilled and reasonable person for believing that there are non-physical supernatural realities. We're so provincial when it comes to our own time and place. We're arrogant to think that views like this that are popular in our time and place are the only honorable positions. I certainly believe that angels and demons are real, and as a Christian, that's a system-dependent position. So while my worldview makes Tucker's theory possible, I still lean towards some kind of advanced technological experimental vehicles or something that our government is trying to test out, or less likely but still possible, some foreign enemy is trying to test out even around the United States. I mean, we did see a floating balloon a couple of times float across the United States in recent history from a foreign body. I know there are problems with that theory, but that's kind of where I lean right now. But all of the positions discussed here would work fine on my worldview and wouldn't harm my Christianity one bit. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments, and you're going to miss the best case that these UFOs are actually angels and demons if you don't check out this linked video where Hugh Ross goes into more detail. So that's where you need to head next.